Uncertainty is terrifying. You begin to question everything you do. It's a fear that can paralyze and overwhelm. And as mistakes pile up, as more people get hurt, how can you be sure that what you're doing is right? You try to follow a path, but when things start to go wrong, the more uncertain it becomes. A knot grows in your stomach, and you start to be filled with nothing but ReZero Season 2 Part 1 picks up right after the events of Season 1. I didn't read the light novels beyond Volume 9, which ends a little past the first season, so while I knew what was coming, I didn't really know how bad things were eventually gonna get. The fact that things were gonna go south at some point isn't that surprising. I expected as much, but the reasons why they did is. I tried not to go into shows with any predictions or expectations about the story. Writers are much better than me at telling one, so I don't even try. But there was one prediction I had going into this season, if you could even call it a prediction, that we would start to explore more of the world now that Subaru was better equipped to face its problems. I was very wrong. The story here is very much a continuation of the journey Subaru started in Season 1. I think I really underestimated the lengths to which author Teppei Nagatsuki would go to challenge Subaru's character. He seems very aware of the transformation Subaru has gone through so far. He's a completely different person than he was at the beginning of the story. Gone is the pride and entitlement that defined most of Subaru's character back then, and in its place is a lot more uncertainty and doubt. To me, the first season was all about getting Subaru to accept the fact that he needs to change and that he has to be the one to initiate those changes. Now that he has, though, the question becomes, what kind of person should Subaru be? Trying to be a better person is good, but it's not very specific. Figuring out your place in a chaotic world can be just as difficult as making the decision to change. Answering the question of what Subaru should become seems to be at the heart of this part of the story. From the beginning, Nagatsuki set out to challenge Subaru's only weapon in this world, his inability to give up. And what happens here is very much in line with that premise. I think that's part of the reason why it feels like not much happens this season. This is the longest time we've spent in one location, and in terms of progressing the main story, freeing the sanctuary, not a lot seems to happen, but I think that's for good reason. There are new stakes here. The challenge Subaru needs to overcome is different than before, and Nagatsuki needs to create a situation that can challenge this new version of Subaru, one who's been through the events of the previous season. Part of that involves giving us a bit more information about him, because knowing why Subaru ended up so broken in the beginning is an important part of understanding why he's so insecure now. The first trial of the Sanctuary, I think, does two things. First, it marks the end of Subaru's character arc that started in Season 1, or is at least a capstone to it. Subaru finally confronts the circumstances that led him down such a dark path in the first place. And two, it provides a bit more context as to why figuring out what Subaru should be is so difficult for him. For most of his life, he was trying and failing to live up to the image of being Kenichi Natsuki's son. That is a toxic way to live, to constantly be compared to a figure outside of your control. Every decision you make becomes filtered through the lens of someone else's presence. Is this something my father would do? Is this how he would act? It can rob you of any sense of self as you start to believe that the only way you can exist is next to someone else. It's an idea that I talked about a bit more in depth in other places, but I think it's relevant here because it shows why Subaru is so insecure, even though he's been transported to another world with no personal history and no expectations. To some people, that might seem liberating for Subaru considering what we know now. You know, minus the whole dying constantly part. But it isn't that simple. For Subaru, it means doing something he's never had to do before. Define himself on his own terms. That seems to be the stage Nagatsuki has set for this part of the story. Subaru is someone who never felt like they were in control of their own life, and now is tasked with finding what a better version of himself is. This part of the story exists to cast whatever choice Subaru makes into doubt. A lot of time is spent building up problem after problem, from the trials to the assassins to the rabbits. It's absolutely overwhelming. Given his current state of mind, Subaru's solution to this is to offer the one thing that sets him apart. It's really sad to see just how quickly Subaru is willing to throw away his life to solve the problems that come up. As morbid as that is though, you can see why that might be tempting. For Subaru, his power is the one thing that makes him different, something that he can hang his entire identity on. And more than that, if he has the power to return by death and save the people he loves, why wouldn't he use it? This is his chance to prove his worth, to take all the suffering and pain of the people he loves and die with them. Maybe that's the person Subaru should be, someone who can carry the burden of others and solve their problems. There are a lot of implications that this decision has on the people around Subaru. Relying on someone else's presence to make decisions like this can leave you broken. It's what broke Subaru in the first place. But what I want to focus on is what this decision means for Subaru himself, because the show makes it very clear that this is not the answer. Just like before, Subaru dies over and over because he believes that this is the role he has to play in everyone's lives, to die with their pain and sorrow. It's unrealistic for Subaru to expect that of himself, and again, shows just how insecure he is. Taking on loved ones' burdens because you believe you deserve that pain more than they do is horrifying. Not just for you, but also to the people who love you. We see a couple of times where all hope is lost and Subaru wants nothing more than to just die and start over. It's at these points that Nagatsuki turns Subaru's own power against him. By keeping him alive instead, Subaru watches as the people he wants to save die in his place. They die trying to protect him. And when he still doesn't understand what that means, he's presented with something that shows just how wrong he is. In the second trial, Subaru gets to see the aftermath of his power, what happens to the people he leaves behind whenever he dies. It's painful for him to see everyone he loves put value to the life he took for granted. Just like how he doesn't want them to suffer, the people Subaru loves and cares about don't want him to suffer either. Except for Elsa, but whatever. It's an important lesson for Subaru to learn to value his own life because people love and care about him. But like I said, this part of the story isn't just about telling Subaru that living like this is wrong, it's about casting doubt on this entire process altogether. Something Subaru thought would save the people he loved from pain makes them suffer more as a result. He made a decision about the kind of person he should be, and it becomes increasingly clear that this was not the right answer. As that reality becomes more obvious, it starts to cast everything Subaru does into doubt. If my decisions hurt others, then how can I be sure that I won't make more mistakes in the future? What happens if I'm wrong again? Will it cost more people like Rem? Am I even capable of making these decisions at all? That seed of doubt leads Subaru to a place that threatens to destroy all the progress he's made so far. I want to clarify something I said in a previous video. When talking about loneliness, I said that the most important element in Season 1 was the fact that Subaru could not talk about his power. To be clear, I still think that's true. Here's the thing. I never expected Nagatsuki to strictly adhere to those rules of return by death. At this point in the story, that mechanic doesn't hold the same power that it used to. What made it so effective in Season 1 was that it forced Subaru to confront his loneliness. It isolated him and made him understand that he has to be the one to initiate changes in himself. The fact that he can't talk about his power is still painful, that's true, but it no longer threatens to undo the progress he's made. He won't give up because of it. It's a mechanic that attacked his fear of loneliness. In this part of Season 2, the biggest struggle Subaru faces is his doubt. And the best way to attack that doubt is by presenting him with a figure that promises to give him all the answers. Echidna, the Witch of Greed, presents an interesting obstacle for Subaru. She's fully aware of everything he's gone through so far, and she's one of the very few people he can truly confide in, at least for now. With her, Subaru can openly talk about return by death and can discuss his plans moving forward. She can see everything that plays out and to some extent knows what might happen next. As he dies over and over, and as more problems pile up, Subaru begins to doubt his own choices. And when pushed into a corner that seems impossible to get out of, Echidna makes him an offer. Leave his life in her hands, because she'll know what to do. Let her be the one to decide his path. It's a tempting offer, and the story tries to do everything in its power to convince Subaru and us that it's a good decision to make. But stories that focus heavily on watching a specific character grow have to balance steady progression with the constant risk of backsliding, and this is a turning point. Throughout the story, we watched as Subaru, a person broken by having all his decisions dictated by the idea of his father, commits to the lonely path of changing himself and struggles to find what that better version of him is. What this part of the story does is to try and cast as much doubt onto that process as possible and challenge Subaru's willingness to change. If he were to go through with Echidna's offer, it would send him all the way back to where he started, a person whose life is dictated by the idea of someone else. If the point of Season 1 was for Subaru to overcome his loneliness, then the point of this part of Season 2 seems to be for Subaru to overcome his doubt. Sometimes when trying to change, you won't get things right. You'll make mistakes because uncertainty is part of the process. Doubt will always be there. The answer to Subaru's question, how will he know what he's doing is right, is that he won't. And he never will. Even with all she knows, Echidna can't promise that the people Subaru loves won't be hurt if she were to decide what he does. The only thing Subaru can do if he wants to change for the better is to keep going. And more importantly, talk to the people he loves. It's not about them being Subaru's reason to change anymore, and it's not about asking them what the answer is. It's about asking a loved one what they need. Someone to support them, a shoulder to cry on, a friend. It won't fix their problems, it won't keep them from pain, but if Subaru wants to be a better person for them, it's the best he can do. And in return, Subaru can rely on those people to be the things he needs in the same way. You shape each other, guide each other, and help each other carry burdens. That's what a relationship is. No one's sure that what they're doing is right, but that's how it's always been. It's interesting to see how Nagatsuki continues to challenge Subaru's character, and as we move on to the next half of the season, it'll be fun to see where the story goes next. Subaru seems to have learned the lessons he needed to, embracing the fact that he can't be a person that solves everyone's problems, and that he can rely on other people even if it doesn't solve everything. And it seems like that's exactly what's going to happen, because the next challenge for Subaru is to completely reject the idea of being that person at all, and to once again face the very thing he could have become. A man whose hopes, dreams, and decisions depend on someone else. As always, thank you so much for watching. Things got busy at work, so it took a bit of time to get this done, but if you want to see what I'm up to, I have socials now. I'm at It's Kyle Robes on Twitter and Instagram, both will be in the description. As a bonus to everyone who watches till the end, I put out a link to an unlisted playlist on my Twitter, which has some fun extras from these videos. I hope to make more stuff this year, and I hope you all have a wonderful 2021.